My sister and her husband had invited me to stay with them at a cabin they'd rented for a week in Oregon. It was early March, too cold for tourists, so the lake and the surrounding area were completely empty. I had some time off work and figured a few days of quiet in the woods wouldn't be the worst thing. The cabin was set about 50 yards back from a wide, still lake and surrounded by tall, bare trees. No leaves, no color, just gray trunks and scattered brown needles on the ground. It was quiet in a way that made you notice every little creak and movement. The kind of quiet where you could hear your own breathing. The kind of quiet that starts to feel too quiet after a while. The cabin itself was simple. One story, old wood frame, small kitchen, living area with a fireplace, and 2 bedrooms off a narrow hallway. My sister and her husband had taken the main bedroom, which had a window that looked out over the lake. I took the second room, which faced the woods. The first night, I slept all right, though the wind made this constant ticking sound against the windows, like someone drumming their fingers on the glass. I remember waking up once around 3 in the morning and staring at the ceiling, unsure what had stirred me. It felt like something had moved outside, but when I got up and looked out through the blinds, there was nothing but dark trees. The days were slow. We hiked a little, read books, cooked simple meals. There was no Wi-Fi, no service, and barely any radio reception. You either sat in silence or filled it with conversation. The isolation started to settle in after the second day. Even the way we spoke began to change, quieter, slower. The lake was beautiful but cold and still, and the longer we were there, the more I started to feel like we were being watched, though I couldn't say by what. Just a feeling. Sometimes I'd glance toward the woods and feel like I had just missed seeing something move, a shadow that shouldn't have been there, but there was never anything obvious to point at. On the 4th day, my sister's husband decided to head into town to get more groceries. It was about a 45-minute drive each way, down a winding forest road that cut through hills and dense pines. He left just before sunset, saying he'd try to be quick before it got too dark. My sister and I stayed in. We opened a bottle of wine and sat by the fireplace, talking about nothing important. Family stuff, old memories, how weird the cabin felt sometimes. I remember her saying the place seemed like it had been empty for a long time, even though the owners listed it as an active rental. She mentioned that the guest book in the living room only had 2 names in the past 5 years, and both entries were dated over a year ago. We were about halfway through the bottle when she stood up suddenly and said she had to use the bathroom. I stayed by the fire, legs stretched out, enjoying the warmth. She was gone maybe a minute, maybe less, when she came back into the room quickly, face pale. She looked shaken in a way that wasn't just surprise. She looked scared. She leaned close to me and whispered, "There's something under the bed." I didn't say anything, just stood up, heart starting to beat a little faster. We walked down the hall to her room together. The hallway was dim. The only light came from the ceiling fixture near the kitchen, so everything beyond the bathroom was dark in that deep, quiet kind of way that makes your ears ring. Her room smelled faintly of cedar and old fabric. She pointed toward the bed and just nodded. I knelt down slowly and lifted the edge of the bedspread. My eyes had to adjust, but once they did, I saw it immediately. A small black camcorder just sitting there, the lens pointed outward. There was a blinking red light on it, still recording. I reached in and pulled it out. It was cold to the touch, slightly dusty. A basic model, looked maybe 5 or 6 years old. No brand label on it anymore. It had been stripped off. I hit stop, then rewind, then play. The screen was small but clear enough. The footage showed the bedroom, this room, from a low angle, from under the bed. My sister and her husband walking around, unpacking, talking, sitting on the bed, changing clothes. Then the same thing the next day. Her brushing her hair in the mirror, him tying his boots. Then her alone, folding laundry, doing yoga stretches on the rug. Then us earlier tonight, drinking wine, laughing. The camera had been recording for days. There was no sign that anyone had been in the room. No sign of forced entry. We checked the windows, locked. Doors, locked. Nothing looked disturbed. But someone had been in the cabin. Someone had placed that camera under the bed. Someone had been watching. We turned off all the lights and sat in the living room, staring at the door. Every tiny creak in the house made us freeze. I kept expecting to hear footsteps on the porch, a hand on the doorknob. Nothing came. When her husband finally returned, headlights sweeping through the front windows, we ran outside to meet him. He got out of the car holding a few bags of groceries and asked what was wrong. We showed him the camera. His face went pale. He asked if we were sure we hadn't seen anyone else around. We told him there had been no other cars on the road in or out for days. No sounds in the woods. No movement. He said the same thing, he hadn't passed any other vehicles. No fresh tire tracks. The gravel road leading in had looked completely undisturbed. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room with every light on, the three of us silent, listening. Just before dawn, we packed up everything we could carry and left. None of us wanted to stay another minute. Later, back in town, we played through the footage again. Near the end, just before I found the camera, there was a 30-second clip that hadn't been there before. It was dark, pitch black, but there was sound. Breathing. Slow, close breathing. Then something being dragged. A soft thump. A pause. And then the sound of the mattress springs creaking above, like someone gently crawling across it from underneath. We turned the camera in to the local sheriff's department. They took it seriously, told us there had been a few similar reports in the past year. Remote cabins, signs of tampering, no suspect ever found. They promised to look into it, but we never heard back. That was the last time I stayed in a cabin like that. My sister and her husband sold the rest of their vacation time and canceled all future trips. We all went back to our normal lives, but I still think about it sometimes. The silence of that cabin. The way it felt like something was always watching. Whoever left that camera there wasn't just trying to spy. They wanted us to find it. They wanted us to know. And the scariest part was how easily they had gotten in. How quiet they must have been. How close. It was deep winter when my girlfriend and I rented a modern cabin in the Poconos. We'd been planning the trip for months, mostly to escape the city noise and stress. Work had been nonstop and she'd been dealing with her own load, so we both agreed we needed to unplug. No phones, no internet, no people. Just a few days away from everything. The cabin was listed as a modern retreat, tucked in the woods with a fireplace, tall windows, and heated floors. It looked clean, cozy, and secluded. The pictures sold us instantly. It was cheap too, probably because it was the off-season. Snow was already heavy in the region, and we knew the roads up would be rough, but we didn't care. That was the point, to get far away. The drive took most of the afternoon. Snow was coming down pretty hard as we got closer, and the GPS started glitching out. We had downloaded the directions just in case, and I was glad we did because there was no signal for the last 45 minutes. The road turned into a narrow trail eventually, plowed only once, it seemed, and the trees got thicker on either side. No other cabins around. No street lights, just woods and snow. By the time we pulled up, the sun was dipping low and the whole place was covered in that cold orange glow that comes right before dusk in winter. The cabin looked even better in person. Sharp black siding, big glass windows in the front, a small deck, and not a single neighbor in sight. Inside, it was warm and smelled like cedar. Everything was clean, minimalist. There was a small kitchen, a fireplace with neatly stacked wood, a living room with a low couch and 2 chairs, and a hallway that led to a single bedroom and bathroom. The back had sliding glass doors that opened out into the woods. No blinds or curtains, which felt a little strange, but we told ourselves that's just how people decorated these forest homes, to feel close to nature. We brought in our bags, lit the fire, and made dinner. I cracked open a beer, and we sat on the couch with the lights low, watching the flames and the slow fall of snow out the window. Felt perfect. Silent, heavy, peaceful. It was around 9 p.m. when I first noticed the red light. I was staring out the front window, spacing out, when I saw it through the trees, a tiny red dot. It looked just like a laser pointer, maybe 30 or 40 feet into the woods. It wasn't flashing, just steady. I thought it might be some kind of trail camera or night gear, but then it moved slightly, shifted to the right. I blinked. Another red dot appeared a few feet from the first, then a third, all in different spots, not lined up and each about the same size. Small, steady red lights hovering out in the darkness. I stared at them for a while, trying to figure it out. They didn't blink or move much, just hung there. My girlfriend noticed me leaning forward and asked what I was looking at. I pointed and she saw them too. She asked if it was hunters or maybe game cams, but it didn't look like that. They were too low to be mounted on trees and too high to be animals. And they weren't flickering like infrared lights or anything mechanical. They were just steady, still, deliberate. Curiosity got the best of me. I put on my boots and coat and stepped outside. The cold was sharp on my face. I looked straight at the lights, but as soon as I stepped off the deck, they vanished. Instantly. No fade, no movement. Just gone. I stood there for a minute, scanning the woods, waiting to see if they'd come back. Nothing. Just dark trees, snow falling, and wind in the branches. I went back inside, a little unsettled, but not wanting to ruin the mood. We chalked it up to maybe some kind of reflection or glitch in our eyes. We got ready for bed a little later. She was already brushing her teeth when I walked into the bathroom. I looked out the small window above the sink just out of habit, and I froze. 10 feet away, just behind the tree line, was a red light. One single dot. I level, completely still. Felt like it was staring right at me. I ducked down quickly, heart thudding in my chest. I turned off the bathroom lights and whispered for her to turn off everything else. We moved through the house in the dark, pulling on coats, grabbing our bags. We didn't say much, just knew we had to leave. I looked back out the window once more before we left the bathroom, and it was still there. Same spot, same height, same red dot, steady as ever. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room with the lights off, staring out the front windows, waiting. We never saw the lights again, but that didn't make it better. In some ways it was worse because we didn't know where they went or if they'd come closer. Every time a branch shifted or snow fell off a tree, I jumped. We packed everything up before the sun rose. Didn't eat, didn't talk. Just loaded the car and got out. The trail back down was slow. Snow had piled up overnight and I had to take it real easy to keep from sliding. About a mile down the road, we saw a truck parked just off to the side. A white pickup with green decals. A game warden. He was standing outside, looking over a map or maybe just waiting to check the road conditions. We stopped and I told him about the lights. Told him how they looked like laser dots, how they moved, how they disappeared when I stepped out. He didn't say much right away, just kind of stared at me like he was trying to figure something out. Then he nodded once and said, "That's not game equipment. Someone was in the woods. You should file a report when you get to town." That sentence sat in my stomach like ice. Someone was in the woods, watching us. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Every turn, every shadow in the trees, I kept checking. Nothing followed us. But even now, I still don't know what we saw. Not exactly. I only know how it felt. That red light was watching, and it was too steady, too quiet, too intentional. We never went back. We were all broke. Me, Jamie, Will, and Cass. College had drained every last bit of our savings and we needed a break. Somewhere quiet, away from campus. No phones, no assignments, just nature and sleep. Will found the listing. It wasn't on Airbnb or any legit site. Some local forum that mostly looked like it hadn't been updated since 2012. The pictures were grainy, like they'd been taken on a flip phone, but the price was stupid cheap. One weekend for all four of us, barely the cost of a single night at a hotel. No security deposit, no ID verification. Just send the money through some sketchy payment app and the guy would send the key code and directions. I should have backed out. We all should have. But that price, man, too tempting. The directions took us deep into some forested area about 2 hours from town. Dirt roads, spotty GPS, barely any signs. It was cold too, that early spring chill still hanging around in the trees. The drive was quiet, almost too quiet. The further we got from anything that looked like civilization, the more my stomach felt tight. But none of us said anything. Nobody wanted to be the one who ruined the trip before it even started. When we pulled up to the cabin, it didn't look awful. Just plain. No real yard, just dirt and dead leaves. The structure looked solid enough. A single-story log cabin with a pitched roof and a little deck out front. But there was something weird about it right away. No mailbox, no tire tracks besides ours, no footprints. It didn't feel lived in. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. Smelled like wet wood and old dust. The living room had just enough furniture. A small couch, a heavy wooden table for mismatched chairs, but everything looked bolted down. The couch was literally screwed into the floor. The chairs didn't move. The table looked like it weighed 200 pounds. There were no pictures on the walls, not even hooks where they might have been. No clocks, no curtains on the windows, just bare glass looking out into the woods. Not even blinds, nothing. The bedrooms were worse. For small rooms, each with a twin bed, a lamp, and a dresser. All the same. The weirdest part? Each door had a bolt on the outside, not the inside. You couldn't lock yourself in. Only someone else could lock you in. I remember standing in that hallway, looking at those latches and just feeling off. We joked about it, of course. Will said it was probably for kids, like if parents brought their family up and didn't want the kids sneaking out at night. Jamie said it looked like a murder house. We laughed, but it was nervous laughter. There was no Wi-Fi, which we expected. No cell signal either, which we kind of expected too. But the landline in the kitchen didn't work. Dead tone. No reception. No way to call anyone if something went wrong. At that point, we probably should have just turned around and left. But we didn't. The first night, we drank a bit. Nothing crazy, just some beers around the fireplace. The place had electricity, barely. Lights flickered now and then. The bathroom light didn't turn on at all. The toilet worked, but the water ran brown for a minute before clearing up. We kept telling ourselves it was just a cheap place, old pipes, nothing to freak out about. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of noise, it was dead silent out there, but because of how dark it was. Pitch black. The kind of dark where your eyes don't adjust because there's just no light at all. No streetlights, no moonlight, no distant glow from a town. Just black. And that stupid window in my room had no curtain. Just glass staring out into the trees. I felt like I was being watched. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. Second night was worse. We went hiking during the day. Just a short trail we found near the cabin. Felt good to get out into the sun, stretch our legs. But when we got back to the cabin, I noticed something weird. The front door was shut, but not locked. I was the last one out, and I know I locked it. I always lock doors. I'm that guy, but it was open. Nothing was missing, nothing looked moved, but that feeling came back. That pressure in the chest kind of feeling, like something was just slightly wrong and you couldn't name it. We sat inside that night, not drinking. None of us felt like it, just sitting around, quietly eating, talking less. The fireplace popped now and then. Around 10, we heard it. Knocking. Soft. Just 3 knocks. Then silence. Then again. 3 slow knocks. We all froze. Jamie looked at me. Will mouthed, "Did you hear that?" Cass stood up slowly. No one moved toward the door. We didn't say a word. Just sat there, staring at the front door like idiots. The knocking stopped. A minute later, the doorknob turned. Slowly. I saw it from the couch. The handle twisted just a little, like someone was testing it. Then it stopped. No footsteps, no talking, just silence again. We grabbed the only things we had, kitchen knives. That's all we had. We turned off the lights, sat in the dark, staring at the door, waiting. I kept trying to listen for movement outside, but it was just wind. Maybe. Sometimes I thought I heard twigs snapping, but I couldn't be sure. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. We stayed like that, frozen, until the sun started coming up. The moment light hit the trees, we were out. We grabbed our stuff, barely packing anything, just throwing it in the car. Got the hell out of there. When we got back into town, We stopped at a gas station to grab coffee and gas up. I asked the clerk about the cabin, just to see if maybe there was some weird history or something. He gave me this confused look, then asked what cabin I meant. I told him the directions, even showed him the picture from the listing. He just stared at it, then said, "That place? No, that burned down 2 years ago. Lightning strike. Whole thing went up. Nothing left but foundation. No one rents that. Nobody can rent that." I didn't believe him at first. Thought maybe he was wrong. Maybe he meant a different cabin. But when I pulled up the listing to show the others, it was gone. The page couldn't load. The site looked like it didn't even exist anymore. We argued about it. Maybe it was a different cabin. Maybe the guy rebuilt it. But something didn't sit right. Cass made us drive back, just to see. We had to know. We found the turnoff, the dirt road, the same path through the trees. But when we got there, it wasn't there. There was no cabin, just an empty plot, covered in weeds and ash and broken wood. The ground was scorched in some places, like fire had eaten through it. You could see the concrete slab of the foundation, half cracked and overgrown. A few blackened trees stood near it, limbs twisted and burned. No structure, no porch, no walls, nothing. We got out and walked around. I found the spot where the fireplace had been, just a pile of stones now half buried. The weird part, I found the handle of the front door, half melted, rusted, just lying in the dirt. We didn't talk on the drive home. Nobody knew what to say. I don't know what that place was. I don't know who we gave our money to. I don't know why the cabin looked intact when we stayed there or why it was gone when we went back. I don't believe in ghosts or any of that crap. But I know what we saw. I know we stayed in a cabin that shouldn't exist. I know someone knocked on that door. I know the fear I felt was real, and I'll never go back to those woods again. My buddy Eric and I were hiking this long, remote trail in northern Montana. It was late October, cold enough that we had to wear thermals under everything, and we could already see patches of frost on the ground in the shaded areas. We'd been planning the trip for weeks, maybe months. Just two guys, taking a break from work and city noise, hiking off-grid for a few days. No cell reception, no people, just quiet. We were about 14 miles deep into the trail system when we found the cabin. It wasn't on the map. The trees opened up a bit on the ridge, and there it was, tucked into a dip in the terrain like it was hiding. The roof was sagging, half of it bowed in like snow or rot had taken its toll. The wood siding was covered in vines, some dead, some still clinging green. It looked forgotten, like nobody had touched it in years. I remember stepping up onto the porch and feeling the boards shift under my boots. The whole thing creaked and leaned. We thought maybe it had collapsed inside. But when we opened the door, the air was stale but not musty. The inside was too clean. Not in a fresh way, just weirdly intact. No trash, no clutter. The floorboards were worn and dry but not falling apart. One wooden chair, one thin mattress on a metal frame, a small propane camping stove that looked like it had been used maybe once. The stove had a little scorch mark underneath it on the wooden floor. The weirdest part was the wall. On the far wall, someone had nailed up a Polaroid. No frame, just a single Polaroid picture nailed through the corner. It was a photo of two people sleeping, in that same room, same mattress, same wall behind them. It was hard to make out their faces because of the angle and the lighting, but the camera had definitely been placed somewhere near the doorway. You could see the wall not pattern matched perfectly. It was this exact cabin. You could even see the same dent on the stove. We should have left. We both felt it. It hit you as soon as you walked in. Like the room didn't match the outside. Too quiet, still air. It felt like someone had just left, even though there was dust on the chair. But we were dead tired. We'd hiked all day through steep terrain, and the sun was already dipping behind the trees. The idea of pulling out our tent in the freezing wind just didn't appeal at that point. We figured someone probably used it occasionally during hunting season or something. So we shut the door and locked it from the inside using a metal latch someone had added. Eric laid out his sleeping bag on the mattress. I took the floor against the far wall. Couldn't sleep well. I remember waking up at least 3 times, once from the cold, once from a cramp, and once from just feeling too alert. I finally dozed off around 2 or 3 in the morning, I think. But then I heard it. That sound. That soft, sharp click like a camera shutter. I didn't move at first. I honestly thought I was dreaming. You know how dreams sometimes feel way too real? That's what I thought it was. But then there was a flash. A bright white burst that lit up the room for half a second. And then footsteps. Slow ones. Not like someone running. Just soft steps across wood. I felt the weight of it more than I heard it. The mattress creaked. My heart shot into my throat. I didn't move. I just opened my eyes, barely. The flash had made my vision weird, so it took a second. But I could see someone, a silhouette, standing near the mattress, facing Eric, holding something. I didn't wait. I shot up and yelled. Eric jerked up too, confused and panicked. We didn't ask questions. We just ran. I didn't stop to grab my boots. Eric didn't either. We both had socks on, barely enough to handle the frozen ground. I remember the sting of stepping on gravel, frozen pine needles, and little sticks. My feet were cut and bleeding before we even got 100 yards from the place, but adrenaline covered most of it. We didn't stop running for a long time. We didn't even talk, just sprinted until we hit a bend in the trail where we thought we could hide. We waited the rest of the night in the dark, curled up behind a fallen log, shivering and listening. But we didn't hear anything follow us. No more footsteps, no voices, just wind and silence. When the sun came up, we limped our way back to the cabin with a park ranger we'd found at a ranger station a few miles out. It took us most of the morning to find someone and convince them to come back with us. The ranger was skeptical at first, asked if we'd been drinking or hallucinating. But when we got back to the cabin, the door was wide open. Inside, it looked the same as before. The chair, the stove, the mattress. No signs of anyone else. No footprints. But on the little table by the wall, there were 2 Polaroid pictures of us, sleeping. The camera angle matched the one from the first photo, doorway height, aimed toward the bed and the floor. You could see my arms sticking out of the sleeping bag, my boots next to my head. You could see Eric on the mattress, blanket pulled over his face. The lighting suggested it had been taken just before the flash that woke me up. The ranger didn't say much after that. He just told us the cabin wasn't officially listed in their database. Might have been an old trapper's hut or logging shelter. He took the pictures and said he'd report it, but we never heard anything after that. No follow-up call, no visit, nothing. Eric tried to call the station later that week, but no one had any record of the ranger we talked to. No name match, no cabin report, nothing. We hiked out of there the same day even though our feet were wrecked. My left foot had 2 big blisters and a torn nail. Eric had gashes on the bottom of both heels. We didn't care. We just wanted out. For days afterward, I kept checking behind me. Even in my apartment, I closed the door and still feel like someone was watching. I put a towel over the peephole. I unplugged the smoke detector once because it made a clicking sound in the night that sounded too much like a camera. I still think about it. About that first photo nailed to the wall. About how the mattress looked untouched and the dust on the chair. Someone had waited long enough for the dust to settle. Long enough to know someone would come. They didn't steal anything. They didn't attack. They just took pictures. I wonder what happened to the people in that first photo. I wonder if anyone ever found them. Maybe that's what the photos are, some sick kind of collection. Like someone waits for people to stumble into that cabin, exhausted, vulnerable, and then watches them sleep, takes pictures, and leaves. We never went back, never will. I booked a solo weekend in a cabin tucked deep in the Colorado mountains. No neighbors for miles, no cell service, no noise except the wind and maybe some birds. That was exactly what I wanted. Just me, a stack of books, and a break from work, emails, and people. I drove up Friday afternoon, winding through the mountain roads until the trees got thicker and the road turned from pavement to gravel. The cabin was exactly like the pictures, small but cozy. It sat on a ridge surrounded by pine trees. There was a big front porch with a couple of wooden chairs, a small fire pit off to the side, and a lofted bedroom with a window that looked out over the forest. The cabin had been recently updated inside. Wooden floors, a small kitchen, modern plumbing, and a little fireplace. It was clean, warm, and just secluded enough to feel like I was completely alone in the world. I dropped my bags near the couch, made a quick dinner, and spent most of the evening reading on the porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. That first night was peaceful. I went to bed early, wrapped in a thick blanket upstairs in the loft. Around midnight, I heard a sound from downstairs. It was a soft scratching, just once or twice. I sat up, listening, but it stopped quickly. I figured it was a mouse or maybe a raccoon outside. The cabin was surrounded by woods. It made sense. Still, I grabbed the flashlight and crept down the stairs. I checked the kitchen, the pantry, even under the sink. Nothing. Everything looked the same as it had earlier. I locked the front door again just to be sure, turned off the lights, and went back to bed. The second day was uneventful. I hiked a little around the property, made lunch on the small outdoor grill, and read most of the afternoon. It was cold in the shade, but sunny enough to be comfortable if I stayed in the sun. That night, I made a small fire outside, listened to the wind through the trees, and then headed back in once the air turned too cold. I showered, had a cup of tea, and climbed back up to the loft with a book. I was halfway through a chapter when the scratching started again. This time it was louder. It didn't sound like it was outside. It was coming from inside the walls, right near the kitchen. It was short and quick at first, then more steady, like something was moving just behind the drywall. My heart started pounding. I set the book down and listened. After a few seconds, it stopped. I waited a minute or two, then grabbed the flashlight again and headed downstairs. I walked slowly, listening for any movement. I checked the kitchen again, the pantry, the bathroom, even behind the curtains. I tapped the wall where I thought I'd heard the noise, but it felt solid. No holes, no movement. Still, something felt off. I couldn't explain it, but I had that weird feeling in my stomach like I wasn't alone. I checked the front door, locked, then the back door, locked too. All the windows seemed shut. Just to be sure, I went around and locked everything again, even though I'd already done it earlier. Then I turned off the lights, climbed back into bed, and tried to sleep. I kept waking up through the night. Every sound felt amplified. The creaks of the cabin, the wind outside, the occasional rustling of branches. At one point, I heard a thump downstairs. Not loud, but enough to jolt me awake. I stared at the loft window for a long time, too tired to get up but too on edge to fall back asleep. Eventually, I dozed off. Around 3 a.m., I woke up again, shivering. I was under 2 blankets, but I was freezing. I sat up and looked at the window above the loft. It was open, wide open. The cold mountain air poured in through it, and I could hear the wind whistling through the trees outside. I hadn't opened that window. I was sure I hadn't. I had checked it the night before, and it had been locked. I jumped out of bed and shut it immediately, locking it tight. My hands were shaking. I stared out into the trees for a moment, trying to see if there was anyone, out there. Nothing, just trees and shadows. I grabbed my flashlight and went downstairs again. This time I moved faster, turning on every light I passed. I checked the front door, still locked. The windows, locked. The kitchen was empty. But when I turned to check the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. There on the hardwood floor, right near the stairs, was a wet boot print. One single, clear print. Large. Too large to be mine. The print was fresh. The water still glistened in the overhead light. It hadn't dried yet, and it hadn't been there earlier. I would have seen it. I backed away slowly, flashlight still in one hand, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to do at first. I just stood there, staring at the print, trying to breathe. I didn't hear anything else. No movement, no voices, nothing. But I didn't feel safe. I grabbed my jacket, my wallet, and my keys, left my phone and backpack behind, and walked straight out the front door. I didn't even turn off the lights. I got into my car, locked the doors, and started driving. I didn't care that it was still dark or that the gravel road was narrow and winding. I just wanted to get out of there. I drove until I found a signal, about 20 minutes down the mountain. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and called the local sheriff. I told them everything, the noises, the window, the footprint. They sent someone out and told me to meet them back at the cabin if I felt safe doing that. I didn't, but I followed the deputy up in the daylight. 2 officers went through the place with me. They were calm, methodical. After about 20 minutes of searching, one of them called me over. He'd found a small crawl space behind a loose panel in the laundry room. The opening was barely a couple of feet high, and the space inside was dark and narrow, but he shined his light in and crouched down. There was a sleeping bag shoved back in the corner, crumpled food wrappers, an empty water bottle, even a flashlight. Someone had been living there. For how long, they didn't know, but judging by how much trash was there, it hadn't just been a night or two. They guessed at least a week. The officers told me it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. People squatting in remote cabins, hiding out in the woods, sometimes slipping in when places were empty and just staying. They figured he had slipped in before I arrived and stayed quiet enough not to be noticed. Probably waited until I went to bed to move around. The open window. Maybe he'd gone out and come back in that way. Or maybe he'd been inside the whole time and opened it to mess with me. They couldn't say. I didn't go back inside after that. I left the rest of my stuff behind. I didn't even want to go near the porch. I drove straight home that afternoon. The owner of the cabin refunded me without asking questions. I never heard whether they found the guy. Maybe he took off when I did. Maybe he was already gone by the time the cops got there. I still think about it sometimes. The scratching sounds, the window opening on its own, that wet boot print in the middle of the floor. I went up there to be alone, but I wasn't, not the whole time.